Hi everybody, welcome to part 2 of the Camellia. So in this episode, which is going to be quite shorter than obviously the previous one, we're going to first of all add extra wires to our bud and our flowers that are now dry. We're going to then create the calyx on the two buds and the flower. We're going to then tape the leaves, and then finally we're going to finish off with the color and assembly. So let's get started. So now all of our components are dry. We're going to add to each of the buds in your instructions, we're going to thicken this like we would a rose by adding 2 extra 22 gauge wires. Okay, so we're going to take two 22 gauge wires. Remember, on here, it doesn't matter whether they're white or green. So you're just going to place those up against the bud. Remember, when we were using this technique, it gives you 3 wires, which gives you a round stem. And you always do this prior to the calyx going on, because if you, of course, did this after the calyx, you'll have a seam, and then if we only use 1 wire, you would have a round, like a flat stem rather than a round stem. Of course, you can just trim a little bit of wire as needed at the bottom here. So you will take, so those will be your 2 buds ready for their calyx. Now our flower that's been drying upside down. So we're going to just straighten that wire out. And then we're going to take 2 20 gauge wires for the flower. Okay, so you're going to add two 20 gauge wires here. Just again, remember, just go around, just slide your floral tape up to the bottom here. And then we're just going to tape down here with your half width tape. Now some camellias do have a sort of a darker, you could use like a sort of a mossy green floral tape. Some have a very dark green. So again, you could use different color. I'm just using the lighter green here because we're going to be using this this color and then brown as our main colors for our arrangement. Just going to cut that carefully. Okay, so you've got your flower, and then you can go ahead and take out your little small pieces of foam. So generally when I take the foam pieces out, I do those with fine tweezers, just carefully. And also I always use usually colored foam, like this is a sort of a green colored foam because it's sort of easy to see. And so you're going to just sort of take your, as I said, foam pieces out and just keep those in a little container because then you can just reuse them. Like when I teach classes, I just put a little pot of these on my students' station. Just make sure they get all the foam pieces out because sometimes you can have a little piece hiding. Okay, so this will be the camellia flower and the buds, and these will be ready now for next step, which is going to be to create the calyx. So for the calyx, we're going to use a very pale moss. So this is a little bit like when we did our winter white project. All right, so we're using similar proportions. So this is about approximately 1/4 green, moss green, and 3/4 white. So what we're actually going to use is going to use a number 8 small green, which is in your instructions, and a number 10 small white. And we're going to then put those together because when we did the winter white spray, we used a number 7 small and a number 9 small. So we're just going to use a number 8 small and a number 10 small. So we're going to get that same sort of palish green color. All right, so just going to work this through. This will be enough for your 3 calyxes. All right. Now the calyx of the camellia is quite thin. It's a little bit like on a daffodil. It's almost like a little bit papery and translucent. So that's why we're also using a lighter green because we're going to be dusting this a green and a red sort of color. All right, and so you've got that, and then this is going to be rolled out number 6. So when you roll it out, you're going to roll out number 3 and number 6, and we're going to cut out with a 70mm cutter. So we're back to the smallest size cutter here. So because you saw this a lot in episode 1 in the first part, I've already got, and you're actually going to be cutting out 2 of these. All right, so you'll have enough to cut out 2 of these. Okay, and so once you cut them out, all right, we're going to just do the regular symmetrical cut. So that means we're going to take the cutter and just going to line it up symmetrically like we would normally do. All right, I'm going to cut, wiggle around, and it's going to give you your sort of just your more basic. So see, this will be sort of more symmetrical. And again, don't worry if it's a little bit sort of off because that's part of the natural look to it. And then you're going to cut this in half, so you can use a mini palette knife, a cutting wheel, just to cut that in half, okay? And then you're going to put one of these into half in your flap, then you'll take the second piece of paste. So you actually need a total of 3 of these, all right? Because we're going to do the same calyx on our, obviously on our components. So these will be our, obviously, calyxes. So you're going to cut those out, just have those ready to go. Remember, a lot of times, especially if you're making more than this, but I will often, especially with working with sugar as well, I would generally just put a cool washcloth, flannel on the top of that, and it keeps it cool and moist while you work on the next step. So then what we're going to do is we're going to cut 2 petals and 3 petals placed back in the flap. So you're going to take out one of the pieces you have here. All right, and then all you're going to do is you can also cut with your scraper as well. So you're going to cut 2 petals and 3 petals like this. All right, now the 3 part is going to go back into your flap here. And what we're going to do is going to take the 2 part, just going to place that onto the veiner like this. Going to just press down with the veiner. All right, so it's going to vein it. I'm going to take it off. It's going to just soften on, it doesn't matter which side, but on one of the sides here, you're going to soften. So we're going to use the medium balling tool here. So it's going to just soften around, just sort of slightly around the edge of that, just a little bit. Okay, so it's going to soften around the edge. You place it onto your cosmetic sponge, and with your companion tool, you're going to just vein on the side you soften, which will end up being the inside. All right, it's going to just soften like this. And so you see then you're going to have the, almost like a vein there, and then your texture, this will be the outside. All right, and then you're going to then brush. So once we've done that, brush egg white down center of petal and attach 2 small bud opposite each other so the bottom half is level with about the middle of the bud. All right, so what we're going to do here, you're going to put your egg white down the middle of this. Now this is going to be longer than we need on the, especially on the small bud. So what you're going to do is you're going to position this. So this wants to be about half the height of the bud. All right. So what I do there is I'm just going to position that onto the bud. Like, so you see it goes about halfway up the length of the bud. And then the other one will go directly opposite that. So just going to just attach that where you put your, I'm just going to mold that around. So you see they come up about halfway up. Okay. Now don't use too much egg white or glue because you don't want to get too much on there, but you can just add a little bit extra as needed. And you see what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to mold this down, and you can just take your scissors and you can just sort of trim off the excess paste here that you have. All right, so you can just pop that underneath a little pot. So these are pretty much fitted. All right, so you just have a little bit of movement on them, but you see how they're going to just sort of sit opposite each other, and you can see they're going to come up about halfway up the height of the cone. All right, now the 3 remaining petals, which will end up being like calyxes, so really almost a bit like leaves. The 3 remaining ones, you're going to just do the same. You see like that middle one is a little skinnier, so but it doesn't matter. Just position that on here. And here, as I said, you're just going to line this up. Just going to press this on. Doesn't matter which petal you have that on. Again, you're just going to take this off. Going to take this, just going to work around your edge just slightly, just to sort of thin the edge a little bit. Put it onto your cosmetic sponge, then down the middle, 1, 2, 3. Going to brush your egg white down the middle here. All right, so just really just brush it. Don't want to brush too close to the edge, because remember, if you were doing, like we're going to be just using the darker red on the edge, but if you were doing a color where you're going to color all, remember the egg white squashes out, it's going to leave a shiny mark on there. Now what we're then going to do is, so we've got 2 petals there on the 2 leaves on there, like calyx is on already. So then we're going to take the remaining 3. Now the first one is going to go in between a gap, either this side or this side. Okay, so you're just going to take that, and just line that up in the same position. So that's going to go on there. The next one will just come around, and then the next one will come around there. So you're just really using these almost, and then you're just going to mold that around with your fingers like this. All right, so just going to just work the paste down. Now if you found it easier, you could cut these up into individual pieces, but I found this works well to just do it like this. All right, and remember this is quite fitted. All right, so this is going to be a fitted sort of calyx on there. And then you're just going to take this up. Now, if you were making, we're going to just do like obviously 2 buds. So we'll have a small bud and a slightly larger bud. But if you were doing, let's say, like say 3 or 5 buds, you could even have some where the green comes up further, but it just wants to come out about, you want about sort of about halfway up there, and you can just open this out just a little bit, all right, and that will give you your calyx. All right, so that's sort of how the calyx sits onto the bud. Okay, now when we do the other, the medium-sized bud, all right, you would just do exactly the same. All right, so the larger bud, the bigger one we have, you're just going to do exactly the same. All right, and so that one would be just done in the same way. So again, you can take this. Remember, you can also even cut with your, you can use this. Just remember, don't ever use like an X-Acto knife, because if you took a blade like a scalpel or an X-Acto knife like this and you work on a plastic surface, you're just going to destroy it, okay? So it's always want to use something plastic like a cutting wheel, as I said, pair of scissors, but mini palette knife. Now you can also just slight variations. You can, because once you've done this once, you'll know what you're doing then. You can also just vein these both at pretty much the same time. Okay, and of course, working in, as I said, air drying clay, or working in, when you're working in your air drying clay or your sugaring paste, doesn't dry quite as quickly. But with classic flour paste, gum paste, you just want to, as I said, just keep them in the flap like that. And see, again, you can just take these off, so you can work with these both at the same time. So a lot of this is going to be dependent on your sort of how confident you feel, and of course also the more you do of these type of products, then the quicker you're going to get as well. So just going to just soften here. So it's just going to soften just a little bit, and then we're going to place that onto your cosmetic sponge. Going to vein down the middle. Okay, and you can just pop that underneath a little couple container while we do the small one. And then we're going to just do the, again, we're now going to take the, so remember this is done on the side, you soften and you vein. Again, your egg white is going to go down the middle here. Of course, the big bud, because it's a little bit bigger, you're going to use this. So again, wants to come up about, again, about sort of halfway up. So that means you're using more of the calyx, all right? So you're just going to just mold that around here. Okay, and then you're going to go directly opposite. Now this doesn't matter in relation to the lines on here, okay? Sometimes when we do certain things, we're going to put the calyx on like down the middle of the petal. So it doesn't, as I said, have to follow the lines on there. It's just, and again, you're just going to just take your excess paste here. And we're just going to pop that on. Just going to mold this around here, okay? And then you see, then you can just go straight on to do the outside one. So again, just brush down the middle here. Okay, so just remember when we do this, you're going to take one of the 3 and you're going to position that in the middle of the first 2. All right, and then you're just going to put these on where they naturally fall, which will be a little bit to there, and then this one here, and then these will just overlap, and it doesn't matter whether they overlap to the right or to the left, but these sort of outer ones, especially on this larger bud, will just sort of overlap slightly. It's not a sort of a formal calyx, meaning it's not so symmetrical, and as I said, you're just going to mold around the bottom of it. You're going to just trim off your excess paste here. It's going to mold around the bottom there like this. A little tiny bit of red paste, you know, something also when you're, remember when you're working with red as well, because sometimes what's going to happen is especially when you're doing things at the same time, you know, remember you're going to get like a little bit of red staining on your hands. Just make sure you wash them before you pick it up to like color green, or when you're making your leaves. So you're going to get so you see how this is going to give you this calyx on the flower and the 2 buds, okay? Now on the flower, you're going to use the same technique, all right? But what you can actually do on the flower, all right, is we don't have to cut this. We're going to just use it like a 5 petals. We're going to wrap it around, very similar to like the way we've done like in the projects, gardenias and flowers like that. So just position that there like so. So you're going to get that just fan type of veining. Okay. And again, we're going to now just take we're I'm just going to soften around here. But we're just doing that as you can see, like as one. So think about a little bit like how we've done some of the calyxes, the lisianthus and things like that, where we're doing that sort of fan-shaped veining. Just going to brush your egg white all the way over this, because this is going to pretty much just fit around the bottom of this. Now here what we're going to do is just going to position this, and I'm going to actually position this down the middle of one of the petals. Now, if you think about a Christmas tree, if you had an artificial Christmas tree and you put in a tree skirt on it, you almost bring this up, because if you push it on, what's going to happen is it's not going to stretch around. So you see I've actually elevated this up. So you think of like a Christmas tree, if this was the stem of your Christmas tree, all right, you almost just tree skirts it's around that. So you see how you actually are going to sort of bring this around. So you're just going to just get that around, so this will fit around like this, all right? And you see how that's going to go down the middle of each of the petals, like so. Okay, so you see like this, and you see then what you can do is you can almost like just push your petals on like so. Just going to mold around the bottom. Again, you can just sort of cauterize that, just trim that a little bit off with your scissors here. All right. Now, when I teach flowers like this, which includes roses as well, sometimes, you know, I'll have one of my students might have, or two students, their flower might feel a little bit wobbly. What that means is when they've done the center, they've just pushed it down a little bit too far, okay? So what it means, the flower is actually on the thread. It's not really on that, that floral tape at the end, all right? So it's really important you get it nice and tight. But as I said, if that was the case and it was like a little bit wobbly, the flower, the calyx, once that sets, is going to hold it in place. As you can see, the calyx here is very similar to a gardenia calyx, all right? And that will be the calyx on the flower, okay? And again, you know, like I'm going to go on to show you the coloring on this, but you could also, again, pop these in your food dehydrator, obviously, so they could dry just while you're doing your leaves, and then we're going to move on to the coloring. So I'm going to put that in my, as I said, styrofoam block to dry, but they don't take long to dry because they're obviously very obviously thin. And then we're going to move on to the next step, which is going to be to actually take the floral tape. And all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to tape my leaves. So again, just going to go around with my floral tape, just slide those up to the bottom, okay? And I'm just going to tape down about 2.5 centimeters with half-width tape. So this is all done with half-width light green tape. You know, some projects we use quarter-width tape, but just going to just tape all of my 7 leaves. So just going to tape those. And so I'm going to continue with those. And then, as I say, when I come back, I'm going to show you the coloring on the flower and on the buds. And then I'm going to show you the coloring on the leaves, and then final assembly ready to go into our container in a couple of weeks' time. So for the coloring, I'm going to use a darker red. This is a ruby red, so just something that's a little bit contrasty to the, you know, like on poinsettias and things like that, we would use this color. And so what we're going to do here is going to take the ruby, and with the buds and flower, I'm going to use a flat brush, and I'm just going to sort of brush this just gently onto the top. So this is just going to give that tip of your bud that just sort of slightly darker color. When this is steamed, this will become a little bit richer in color. So I've already done the small bud. And then on your flower, you will do the same on your flower. So you just will brush from the outside to the inside. I've already done part of this, so just gonna just give you that darker color on the edge. And also you would do that the same on the underneath of the petals as well. So you're just gonna just work from the underneath of the petals also, okay? Just going to give that darker, slightly darker color onto there. So that will be the ruby. Now then we're going to take some lime green. I'm going to use just a little bit of lime green color, just a sort of brightish green. Lime or apple would work. I'm just using a lime here. And we're going to put that into the middle of the flower. So what we're going to do here is just going to just open up the flower stamens just a little bit with like a toothpick, or you can use your companion tool. You can see how you're almost creating a little hollow there, and then you're just going to just take that and just sort of pounce in the middle of that with your lime greens. You see how I'm just going to put the lime green into the middle of that. And then what you'll do is you'll just re-fluff those back in position. So when you actually look through this, you'll sort of see the green in the center. You'll just have a little bit of green at the base, all right? So that's the limey green color. So then we're going to move on to the calyx on the buds and flowers. So first of all, I'm going to use some pale chocolate. So this is just chocolate brown with the addition of corn flour or cornstarch. So we're just going to take that. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to brush this around the edge of the calyx. So I'm just going to use just a small sort of flattish brush, but just going to brush just a little bit around brown, just a pale chocolate brown, just around the edge. Because I said the calyx of the camellia is a little bit like almost the calyx of a daffodil. It's sort of quite papery looking, so we're just going to just brush around this brown color like we would use on a daffodil as well. So you're just going to do that around the base of the calyx, around the tip of the calyx. You also do that on the bud as well, the small bud. You will also do that on the flower as well, on the flower calyx. So just going to come around the edge there with the brown, the pale chocolate brown. Okay, pale chocolate color. Then we're going to use some moss. So this is moss green. So the moss green is going to be used. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to brush the moss from the base of the calyx, just sort of gently. I'm using a fairly small brush, but just going to just brush that sort of. So you see how it's not sort of completely solid. You almost get this sort of translucent look to it. But just going to just brush the moss green from the base coming up. So just going to brush the moss green coming up here. Moss green coming up here. Okay, and then a little bit of the pale chocolate right at the bottom. So then you're just going to just take the pale chocolate there, just sort of right at the very, very bottom. It's best to do that after you've done the green, all right? So just going to put just a little bit of the pale chocolate at the very bottom. I've already done that on the bud as well. All right, these will both be steamed in a minute. When you steam them, that makes a big difference, intensifies the color. And again, you're going to then use the same moss green on the calyx. You want the calyx to dry a little bit before you do this, all right? So obviously, and then we're going to again just put a little bit of the chocolate brown just right at the bottom there as well. Okay, and so that's the coloring on the flower and the buds. And then once you've got the coloring on the flower and the buds, you're going to then steam those. And so we're just going to bring in our steamer here. And we're going to steam them. That's going to set the color. Just make sure you have all of the colors on there first, all right? And then we're going to steam them. And then we'll going to move on to the foliage. So now the steamer is just coming out there now. So just going to steam this. Just going to steam it. So it's going to really sort of intensify the darker color on the. Again, you're just going to just steam your buds. And that will give you the coloring. So you'll have that sort of darker red on the edge of the camellia petals. All right. So that is how we would do the camellia flower. Now on the leaves, all right. So on the leaves, we're going to do this. The camellia has a sort of a lighter, like limey color down the center, okay? So a little bit different technique here we're going to use. So what we're actually going to do here is going to take just a little equal amounts of some white, some daffodil yellow, and some lime green. Now, we discussed this in one of the other projects, and in fact, one of the Q&As, one of our members had a message about, well, how do you dust green on a dark color? Like red. So what we do here is using white titanium dioxide or white dusting powder. What that does, it masks out the background color, just like when we do painting, when we do like a one-stroke painting. So I've got some white and I'm going to put some yellow. So about equal amounts of those three. Okay, so you don't need a huge amount of that. So about equal amounts of those three colors. So white, yellow, and then you're going to take your brush here. I'm just going to combine those together. So you see it's going to make a sort of really almost like a lighter lime color. But because of the titanium dioxide in there, what that's going to do is going to mask out the background color. But this also means if you wanted to dust, let's say, a green on the base of a red rose, or for example, a red tulip, this is the technique we use. Now, what we're going to do here, we're going to use a small flat brush, and I'm going to brush a stripe down the middle of the, just going to brush a stripe down the middle, and I'm also going to just brush around the edge of the leaf as well. So I'm going to sort of just brush a stripe down the middle. So it almost looks a little bit white, but it's going to be opaque. And just hold your brush and just rub down the center. And you're then going to do the same on the back. So front and back is both the same here, like so. And you do that on all of the 7 of the leaves, okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to then take a forest green. This is a darker green because camellia leaves are usually darker, but you could use a moss as well, but this is a forest green color. And what I'm going to do here is with the forest green, again, I'm using a flat brush here, and I'm just going to cut. So you see, I'm using a little bit like when we do a lily. I'm actually using my flat brush to cut, because I actually want to just leave that middle, the sort of a fairly thin line, that opaque. See how you just need this thin line here, like so. And then you're going to bring your green to the edge, but you're going to leave the very edge that sort of limey green color, because when you almost look at the side of a camellia leaf, it has that sort of color there. I'm just going to bring that up to the top. You know, so sometimes when we do foliage, you know, foliage can sometimes be a little bit more time consuming than just a straight overall color. But here you're going to get this sort of this stripe effect then. And then you're going to do the same on the back. So again, on the back here. So you're just going to just fill in. But you're leaving the, you can see how the edge of the leaf is that green color. And then you're leaving the very stripe down the middle, that light color as well. And of course, because this is done on a moss green colored paste, you get this nice sort of contrast color. Now the other way you could do that also is you could actually make the leaf in a very bright limey green color, you know, with like yellow and green together. And then you could of course just leave that original color. But again, you know, in each project, I'm just showing you different techniques and things there. And so we're going to take those colors, and then we're going to steam the leaves here. So we're just going to steam the leaves. So when you do this, of course, you can put these in your block. And remember, we talked about this in previous lesson about like this is just a block covered with press and seal, which is like almost a sticky plastic wrap, cling film, and you can use cling film as well. And usually this is what I use in my classes. So if my students, like, they bring their leaves over on a styrofoam block like this, they dust them, then they steam them, and then usually we go outside and then they just spray them with the spray lacquer. Now, so you're just going to just lightly steam the leaves. All right, so that's just going to sort of set the color, because remember, especially those of you, if you're working with air drying clay, you would, of course, you would use hairspray there. So you'd use your color and then you use hairspray, which acts just like the steam as a fixative. And then that enables you to be able to then spray them. And then again, you know, you can just do this into a box. So I'm just doing this so you can see it in camera, but usually, of course, you can hold it up like this. But just going to spray this into the box there. Just going to go over the other side here. And of course, with your air drying clay, you can use like the Sculpey satin glaze spray, satin glaze brushed on the leaves. That's a really nice product. And of course, you can use brush on leaf glaze as well. Okay. So here we've got the, we are going to add a little bit of chocolate brown when we get to sort of move on to the assembly. So leave your dust out. So we're going to be working with some of the pale chocolate brown just to finish that up. And so we've got our leaves made. So we just need to let these dry for a few minutes, and then we'll be ready to put the camellia, its buds and its leaves together. So first of all, we're going to take the 2 small leaves and attach them to the small bud. The 2 medium leaves will be attached to the medium bud. So I'm going to come down about 5 centimeters, or about 50 millimeters down the wire. And then I'm going to just take the leaves here. I'm just going to just bend one right to the left and one to the right, just literally a couple of millimeters, a 1/16 of an inch down. And then you're going to just attach them here and here. So these, as I said, this is about 5 centimeters here, okay? And then once you get those attached, we're going to take your light green floral tape. It's going to just tape down with my wire like this. So this is very similar to the anemone that we used in the January project, in the way we're going to use this. All right, and then I'm just going to bend the wire here. So what I'm going to do here is just going to curve the wire, and then I'm going to take a little bit of pale chocolate, and just where the stems meet the leaves, all right, so where the stem meets the leaves, we're just going to put just a little bit of pale chocolate on there, and just a very, very light dusting of chocolate on that 5 centimeter part. Because the stem of the, you know, you wouldn't use brown because it would be just too brown, but you're just going to use, as I said, and it's going to come down just a little ways. So really, as I said, you're just going to do a light chocolate over the surface here. And you also would do the same here, so just a little bit of light brown. Remember, we've already got light brown at the base of the calyx. Just bring this to where this meets the base of the leaf. Okay. Then we're going to take so we're going to bring in your the small bud. So this is going to be the small bud here. All right, now approximately about 2/3 of the way down the length of the wire. Okay, I'm just going to sort of bend that so you have a little bit like a banana shape. So you can see I've got about 2/3 curved and about 1/3 straight. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use an 18 gauge wire. So at that point there, I'm going to add an 18 gauge wire about 2/3 of the way down. I'm just going to bend this. It's going to go around a couple of times like this. And then my smaller leaf is going to be bent about halfway down. All right, so about halfway down the wire here, I'm just going to bend that out, and that's going to just be attached here like that. And it's going to just sort of, don't worry too much about the leaves because we'll be able to sort of bend these once we get them put together. So really at that point where the 18 gauge wire, very similar to like the way almost a peony grows. And then you're going to come down about, again, you're going to come down here about 5 centimeters. Okay, it's going to come down about 5 centimeters. So just going to have the leaves coming out from the top there. And again, we're going to put in some pale chocolate. So just going to take a little bit more pale chocolate here. All right, and we're just going to worry about this area here because this is going to be the part that's going to be visible. As I say, we won't worry too much about the exact position of these at the moment because when we actually put this into the arrangement, we will be doing this more like an arranged container, not a wired container, a little bit like the autumn arrangement where we'll be putting things in, but just a little bit of the pale chocolate there. And then I'm going to just give that a steam, okay? Because remember, the steam will help to, that just sort of holds everything. Air drying clay, just spray it with hairspray, unscented hairspray, and that would hold it in place. So remember, this is about 2/3 of the way down, about halfway down, and then remember, then you're going to add the 18 gauge wire there. I'm just going to gently steam that. All right, so really what I'm doing here, this is just going to steam the dusting powder onto there. You're going to get this nice sort of color, this nice, very pale chocolate. They're all cool, so you can buy, you know, floral tape in like a caramel color. It's like a really pale chocolate. It's actually a relatively new color. So, you know, the thing is you could also use that as well. But this just gives a very nice natural, so you get that green to brown color combination. All right, so now what I'm going to do is going to take my Camellia flower. All right, so just sort of have a look at the flower, and then we're just going to bend the flower just slightly forward. And the Camellia, so remember we've taped down about, as I said, about 5 centimeters, and then the Camellia flower is going to sit into position here. All right, so the Camellia flower will just sit into, so you see how it's sitting forward here. Just going to tape this into place. Just going to go around with your floral tape here. And you can just sort of bend this out like this, all right? So you're going to get this nice So how the camellia grows. It's a little bit like a peony as well. And then we're going to take the leaves here. So these will be the larger leaves here. And I'm just going to leave a little bit longer. I'm leaving here, as you can see, a little bit longer wire on the stems there. All right, just come around there so you can see that. All right, so there you're going to have that. It's going to be about 10 millimeters. All right, so just to extend it out just a little bit there. And then we're going to put another leaf in here. So just pretty much, as I said, that classic 3 leaves, which we're going to use here on the 1, 2, 3 like this. And then this one will actually sit forward. So just going to take that one and just about 10 centimeters down, just going to bend that forward. So the leaves will just sort of sit out like this, you see? And that's going to be taped together. And then you can, once you tape this together, we're just going to tape down to the bottom of the stem here. And we're not going to worry about trimming this at the moment, because you can just trim where the white wire meets your other wire. You can just trim it off to the length of that. But as I said, pretty much leave that, just be careful of obviously cutting those stronger wires. Just going to just tape down here, because we will, as I said, then be able to just trim this as we need. All right, so you're going to have your leaves here. All right, so this will be your sort of camellia, and really beautiful flower here. And then you can just go in with a little bit more chocolate, and just with a little bit of the pale chocolate, you can then just add a little bit. It's just easier to do this as you go. Just a little bit of like just the pale chocolate here, just to give a little subtle color onto the stems here. You don't need to come down too far, about halfway down the total length of everything. A little bit of the brown color at the base of those leaves, and also at the base of the flower as well. And then we can just re-steam that. So we're just going to re-steam the flower. Okay, so again, we're just going to just re-steam that as far as the, where the stem is. Okay. And then you're just going to put this into your, carefully into a block, put it in well so it's not going to have any drama, getting tipped over or anything. And so that will be our camellia. And so what the camellia is part of is that we're going to do obviously with our Asian flower and foliage theme. All right, so in the next lesson, all right, so basically in lesson 3 of this project, we're going to create a container. All right, so I've asked everybody to obviously have a soup can or a fruit can or a vegetable can. And what we're actually going to do is we're going to cover this like the cake that's behind me, which I'll show you here, and obviously in here you can see there, but we're going to be doing bring the cake over so you can see that. But this is done obviously on a cake, all right? So this is actually done with the new bamboo mold, all right? So this is the new bamboo mold, which you'll be seeing how that all works and everything in the next episode, all right? And so this has got a small, medium, and large bamboo. Also has a little offset bamboo. So we're going to actually use this can as a container. All right, now what we're actually going to do is we're going to then use vertical bamboo, and you'll actually be able to either do it in green bamboo, which is this brighter green color, or you'll be able to do it like dried bamboo. I'm actually going to do it in dried bamboo, but either in sugar or in air drying clay, you're going to actually cover this can to make the container for the arrangement to sit into. And so we'll actually be doing, and you can see here on the cake board, I've got the bamboo on the side of the cake board. But we're going to be doing vertical lines in there. So in the next episode, I'm going to be showing you using both air drying clay and also just sugar paste or rolled fondant, all right, modified fondant. And you're actually going to cover this with bamboo. So it's going to make a very realistic sort of Asian container, which you could also use that in air drying clay to put pens in and things like that. But this is just a really fun way, a very inexpensive way to make a container. And this could even sit like on top of a wedding cake. It could sit obviously on a celebration cake. Then your client could literally just take that, and then obviously like we talked about baskets and things, things. And in this container, once it's finished with the bamboo, we're obviously going to be making, in the next episode, we're going to be making some bamboo. We're going to make a couple of pieces, a longer and a shorter piece. So this is going to be realistic bamboo. So this is going to just to sort of give you an idea about sort of how it's going to look, all right? So we're going to have the bamboo, so we'll have bamboo in the arrangement in the container as well. And then we're also going to add plum blossoms. So this is like ume or Chinese or plum, which is very popular in Japan. And this is part of the blossoms mold. And there also, of course, you could use almond blossoms, you could use peach blossoms as well. But plum is a very, obviously plum wine is made from this. So in China and Japan, plum wine is very, very popular. So we're going to also have ume in here. So we're going to be having some of the plum blossoms in there as well. And then, of course, it will be arranged. And then we're going to also include in here, we're going to have some more bamboo. We're also going to include in here some Japanese maple. Now, Japanese maple we use in the autumn time, obviously in the beautiful sort of bronzy colors, the sort of chestnut colors. But Japanese maple can also, of course, be used in springtime and summertime with more of a bright green color. So we're actually going to have some, so when we put the components in there, we'll have the Japanese maple coming out from here, the camellia, the plum blossoms, and then I said a couple of pieces of bamboo. But this just gives you a little bit of a vision of what we're working towards, all right? So really fun. And you can see here the reason why I chose the pink is because, you know, pink and red is a color used a lot in Asia. It's a color we don't usually use a lot in like Europe or in the United States together, but it also is becoming more popular. But in like Korea and places like that, they use a lot of pink and red together. And so that's why I did the camellia in this red, and then you have the sort of fairly bright pink color. So it's just a nice, as I said, fun combination. So it's going to be a little bit more of a sort of modern arrangement, and as I said, more sort of Asian in style. And then we're going to, as I said, arrange those into the container. So we'll be using, as I said, not only the bamboo to make the container to put this in, but also making the bamboo to go in, the realistic bamboo. All right, and so hopefully that gives you some sort of inspiration and excitement into the next part of the project. And so that is the camellia finished. You can see sort of a really beautiful flower. And as I said, remember, when you've obviously used this, once you've made this a couple of times, you can make these in all different types of colors and different combinations. And of course, there are some varieties like white, which have like red markings where you could actually make it in white and put red markings onto there. There are also some of them that are made in red with white markings. So a little bit like how I showed on the anemone, showing that on the sort of the pinky colored petals. You could take some white powder color with some vodka or white gel, and you could, or acrylic if you're using air drying clay, and put like markings on there. So there's actually a variety called candy cane, which actually that was developed by a close friend of ours in Atlanta, his father, who was a camellia grower in Alabama, and he developed this camellia called candy cane, and basically it's a red and white striped camellia. So when actually he had his 80th birthday, I made the candy cane camellias for his celebration for his birthday cake. So really fun flower, and as I said, just you can see similar to a rose, but a little bit different. It's almost a combination to me of a rose and a peony when you look at the sort of the buds and the things like that. But here we have your, as a beautiful camellia. So I hope you will have fun making that. And as I said, this will be the first component ready to go into our finished container. So I hope you've enjoyed the second part of the camellia. We'll have a lot of fun along the way completing this. Remember, just post any questions you have. And remember, next time we're going to start on our bamboo. So again, that's going to be done in 2 parts. And I'm going to be showing you obviously how to make realistic bamboo, plus also more for cakes and things in a container. So you'll sort of see the different ways of using this. Till next time, sweet wishes. See you soon. Bye.